are the top 5 more roguish picks that you can have success with out here post Cyberstorm Access? Don't beg 30% of you that have not smashed the ever-living crap out of that subscribe button. Smash it so you guys don't miss out on more awesome content. Number 1 on our list here is going to be Exo Sister. Wow, it's been a very long time since we've actually had a discussion on Exo Sister out here. Remember, Exo Sister thrives on interactions with your opponent and their graveyard. Now, with Runic and honestly purely having an interaction to pull things out of the graveyard, that's 2 top decks. Honestly, Despia interacts with their graveyard too. You got a decent amount, actually Scareclaw too. Yeah, you have a lot of in the upper half of the format decks here that do make an interaction point for the graveyard. Now, the thing that makes this deck stronger than it previously was the fact that you now have a spirit monster that gets around the lock of you can only special summon Exo Sister monsters for this turn. Because that was kind of like the downside with Martha, was, you know, when you create a monster that says can't special summon anything but Exo Sister, they needed to find a way to get around that. So Aratama, Sakitama, Aratama, search for Sakitama, reveal Sakitama, additional normal summon it, and then you go ahead and make the searcher off of Exo Sister. Now you can go ahead and search for Martha, because the only monsters that you have, you know, you've not special summoned anything, and you've also searched for, you know, or you've only done Exo Sister, now you only control Exo Sister, so now you can go ahead and special summon that and then go ahead and do your combo at that point in time. I think that keeping that in mind is going to be the thing that's going to get this deck off the ground. It's also going to depend on your matchups. Essentially, having a 1-card Magnifica is pretty cool. But we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the format shapes up. I think as a rogue pick, that this deck will be able to really, really mess people up. And that's what you want to see right now. Good stuff. Next up is the power of Teller Knights. You know, Teller Knights got this new support. This was the support that bridged the gap between Constellars and, you know, Teller Knights. We got our lore put together, finally. The big Teller Exceed monster, giving you the ability to make it on 2+ level 4s, is by far one of my favorite things. It gets the ability to pull back a Teller or a Constellar card, and then you can basically make his effect into the effect of one of your monsters. So you can turn it into like a Deneb, for example, and then you can go ahead and do your thing. I think the thing that makes this deck actually like viable is still the fact that you like get super access to like Constellar Night Diamond, or the whole big vacuum cleaner that says no dark monster effects. Problem is like Tier doesn't exist as a deck. So, like, what are you really worried about in this format? Like, what is going to be the biggest thing that you need Teller Knights to kind of counter? And I guess it'd be, like, Ptolemaeus Turbo at this point. I feel like I've seen a lot of cool gameplay on the whole concept of wanting to play this deck as Teller Knight Turbo, or Ptolemaeus Turbo, because trying to take the extra turn, you know, essentially lock your opponent out of playing the game, is hilarious. It's gimmicky, and I mean, Yu-Gi-Oh! Players have a soft spot in their hearts for gimmick. That's the thing that's always going to make them, you know, smile at the end of the day is, you know, how can I have the biggest, you know, line of success out here? And I mean, the answer is probably going to be how much cheese can you put into a deck. But the regular build of Teller Knights might be able to do something on like a local level. But I have a feeling, just out of like left field for a roguish pick, it's really, really in a weird spot. Next up is Sword Soul. Now, why is Sword Soul not in the top 10 list? Honestly, between like Sword Soul, Flaunderies, a lot of the other competing decks out here, you're very well aware that these decks have been here. They're doing things, but they haven't gotten anything new and flashy. That's kind of like my problem with them right now. You can only really make these decks, you know, out to be so much better after so much time. And honestly, at this point in time, I think Sword Soul has been old reliable. The fact that you haven't had to, I mean, have you really had to change much in the basic construction of the deck? I feel like the biggest decisions that you have to make in terms of the current build are, do I want to play the Water Tenyi? Do I want to play evenly matched in some sort of capacity, which, granted, usually, I think most of the builds end up citing it at this point in time. That's not a bad thing, don't get me wrong. I mean, like, the fact that you can still play it is very, very important, but it really comes down to that basic construction and how you can pick your hand traps, what ratios are going to be best. I mean, we've seen some really tacked out builds of Sword Soul. I remember that we had the super extreme Bysteel build that came out of left field quite some time ago that a lot of people were just like kind of dumbfounded because its entire purpose was to kind of counter the meta. And you have to remember with the way that Sword Soul is built, you know, with the same consistent cards in mind, you just have to make those adjustments. And like I said before, Sword Soul's end board is very, very fair at the end of the day. You know, literally, if you're playing, you know, Blackout plus like 2 negates, I mean, you do it consistently usually. And that consistency is what's going to get this deck where it needs to be. Next up is going to be Marincess. You know what boggles my mind? For the amount of success that this deck had handed to it out of last format, a lot of it was contributed from 2 of the same players, honestly. I've seen multiple tops from 2 duelists. Now, what's interesting about that is we haven't really had another deck in Yu-Gi-Oh! History as of late that was like in the roguish category that had a more limited window of tops, but it was, you know, these repeated players having success over it. You have to keep in mind that Marincess with Battle Ocean is incredibly strong. All right, and plus with the format not really having spell and trap removal, you're literally able to go into this game state where your opponent can't really do anything. Plus, like, if you establish like an Aqua Argonaut, people don't know what Aqua Argonaut does, and plus it's like a spell and trap negate. If you can combo like your proper time negate, your opponent's going to have a crap matchup. Also, you know, when you have all these equips lined up, you also have other sub-boss monsters you can go into. The additional draw monster is also kind of incredibly strong. A deck that can draw into additional hand traps while maintaining that pressure on the opponent usually will have a good place in the format. You just have to keep in mind that once you apply that pressure, you have to be able to do your thing. Hand traps within the deck have to be able to allow the deck to establish a board and be able to play the game. Honestly, if you can make both of those check marks in terms of deck building, consistency. Also, I mean, Marincess is usually what, like a full 1-card combo usually. Most of your cards act as extenders for the deck as well. So that's not an issue. Like, you're literally off to the races depending on how you open up for about 90% of your opening hands. So a lot to kind of take in. The deck has definitely been one of the more roguish picks though as late. And then we have Tron. This deck, the ritual toolbox of things is hilarious, all right? So many people have very much underestimated what this deck can do. The whole Amorph factor, skipping your opponent's turn, is gorgeous, all right? Like, if your opponent's like, all right, cool, so today we're going to go ahead and we're going to build Tron, we're going to spice it up with a skip main phase. Well, you can get super cheesy and make your opponent skip their battle phase in this deck, too. There's so many things that you can do with Tron. It's kind of put it into a good position for, like, a toolbox deck that, as long as you can, you know, pick your tech choices for what you think that the metagame is going to be, you should be able to go in a relatively good metagame winning position. But once again, it comes down to a lot of deck building, a lot of how you think that you're going to need to handle certain matchups. And honestly, Tron has enough resources going about it in terms of the deck build department that it can round out a lot of the things that it should be able or have an issue with. So, also, I mean, Tron, literally, I've seen that deck play through so many interruptions that it's not even funny. And plus, Bysteals aren't running around in the format. What does the deck have to worry about right now? Like, it still is topping multiple regionals. It has definitely been a consistent go-to for quite some time, and I think we'll continue to see it. So that is my rogue picks for the very early stages of Cyberstorm access. But alas, what do you guys think? Please leave a comment down below, tell me what you guys think, and I'll see your beautiful faces back here later today, guys. Peace out. Patrons, thank you.
Thank you so much for watching. Check out these other videos.